It's interesting you say the power of threes. I was known to be I was a humor director. So if you had humorous scripts, you would bring them to me. I could do drama, but there were directors that were better at that than me. But humor was always my thing. And I used to call them bingo, bango, bongo moments. That
Good.
when things happen in threes, like, two knocks at a door is one thing, but three knocks is funny. And it's hard to articulate why that is. Or
Ah,
if something falls off let's say a glass falls off a table, if it falls in a sequence of three sounds, it's funny. And if it falls in two, it isn't. So
right?
that even the power of three is a powerful rule within audio.
That fabulous voice belongs to Terry O'Reilly, host of the popular Under the Influence podcast. I've been listening to Under the Influence for years, and I've always enjoyed Terry's sense of humor and his skill as an exceptional storyteller. And I knew that we're both Canadian and we're both podcasters, but I had absolutely no idea that he's also a huge fan of the power of three. Did you hear what he said? Bingo, bango, bongo. Let's do this.
Let's do this. Let's talk about talk.
Welcome to Talk About Talk podcast episode number 173, Under the Influence with Storyteller Terry O'Reilly. In this episode, you're going to learn the ingredients that are necessary to create compelling stories, how and why to peel back the onion and think hard about what business you're really in, and a lot more. In case we haven't met, my name is Dr. Andrea Wojnicki. Please just call me Andrea, and I'm your executive communication coach. I coach ambitious executives just like you to improve your communication skills so you can communicate with confidence and clarity, establish credibility, and ultimately achieve your career goals. Sound good? To learn more about me and what I do, just head over to the talkabouttalk.com website and you can read all about the coaching and the workshops that I run. Plus, there are a bunch of free resources for you at the bottom of the homepage. You can also sign up for the Talk About Talk email newsletter where you can get free coaching from me in your inbox. Head over to talkabouttalk.com and sign up now. All right, let's shift gears. I can't wait for you to hear my conversation with Terry O'Reilly. If you've ever heard his Under the Influence podcast, then you know that Terry is like an encyclopedia of stories and insights. And as you're about to hear, he's exactly the same in real time, without a script. He's also very gracious. Let me introduce Terry, and then we'll get right into the interview. And at the end, as always, I'm going to summarize with 3 learnings that I want to reinforce for you. Sound good? Okay. Long before he had a radio show, Terry was an award-winning writer at Canada's top advertising agencies, creating campaigns for top brands such as Labatt, Bell, Nissan, and Hudson's Bay. In 1990, Terry co-founded Pirate Radio and Television with 8 recording studios in Toronto and New York City. In 2005, he became the host of the CBC Radio 1 and WBEZ Chicago radio show called Under the Influence, with over 1 million listeners a week. His podcast has been downloaded over 75 million times. Terry was awarded with a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Advertising and Design Club of Canada, and he's been granted honorary degrees from 3 Canadian universities. The power of 3 again. He's also written 3 books, the latest being My Best Mistake, about people who make catastrophic career decisions, but it ended up being the best thing that could have happened to them. Terry has a wonderful wife and 3 lovely daughters, and he says they sometimes like some of his work. All right, here we go. Thank you so much, Terry, for being here today to talk to me and the Talk About Talk listeners.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
There's so many directions that we could go in this conversation, advertising, branding, personal branding, but I thought something that really stands out about you that I appreciate very, very much is your fantastic ability to tell stories. So I thought we would start there. And I'm curious, as a master storyteller, what do you think makes for a great story? Is there an ingredient list that's necessary?
That's a very good question. When I think about that, I think two things. I think structure. I think that's always been one of my strengths for whatever reason, who knows, is story structure. That may have come from almost 40 years in the advertising business where you have to, structure mini stories inside 30 and 60 seconds, which is, a Herculean feat at best. So I think, and even you see a lot of movie directors start out in the advertising business and they learn storytelling because you have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end inside 30 or 60 seconds. And I think that's a real discipline that you have to develop. So structure is the key for me because as a director, so I directed commercials for three-quarters of my career. I think I directed, my staff told me at one time, something like 14,000 commercials in my career.
Wow.
So I got to see a lot of really great storytelling and a lot of really bad storytelling. And where most stories fell down, Andrea, was in the end. There was great beginnings, wonderful middles, and terrible ends. They
Mm.
just never wrapped up. They never had a destination in mind. It didn't come to this wonderful, satisfying. It's like seeing a great movie and you think, God, I loved everything but the way it ended. You know that because the ending is the toughest thing for a writer to write. So structure to me is critical, that you have a beautiful teasing opening, and then you have this really sumptuous middle, and then you have this inevitable end that's just so satisfying.
Right.
And I would think the other little thing beyond story structure is the element of surprise,
Hmm.
where you don't really know where a story is going, or you think you know where it's going, and then the writer just yanks you to the left or to the right. And I think those unexpected moments add impact.
My brain is immediately going to personal branding when you say that, but I'm going to stick with advertising
There you
for
go.
a couple minutes here. Um, so beginning, middle, and end, consistent with my love of the power of three. I'm thinking about my self-introduction framework. Start with who you are, what you do, what your passion is, what your expertise is. Ground yourself in the present, then go past to establish credibility. And most people end there, right? They're like, and that's me, right? Going around the table or around the screen. Step three is the icing on the cake. And you said similarly that many people or many stories are missing kind of that part three or the ending of the story.
Act three. Yeah.
Yeah, act three. So that's interesting that analogy.
Even in sound, Andrea, it's interesting you say the power of threes. I was known to be I was a humor director. So if you had humorous scripts, you would bring them to me. I could do drama, but there were directors that were better at that than me. But humor was always my thing. And I used to call them bingo, bango, bongo moments. That
Good.
when things happen in threes, like, two knocks at a door is one thing, but three knocks is funny. And it's hard to articulate why that is. Or
Ah,
if something falls off let's say a glass falls off a table, if it falls in a sequence of three sounds, it's funny. And if it falls in two, it isn't. So
right.
that even the power of three is a powerful rule within audio.
I had no idea, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah. That's the
So
power of three. Three is this amazing number in our lives. Although they say the world's favorite number is seven, and the world's favorite color is blue.
yeah,
But I'd say three is really it is that key secret ingredient.
yeah. I think seven is like the maximum. There's something like that's why phone numbers are
That's
three
right.
plus four, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a fan of threes. You have three daughters, right?
I have three
Yeah.
daughters. That's right.
I did my reading,
You
Terry.
did. You did.
Uh, so back to the storytelling, I would love to hear what your take is on what brands are the best storytellers, maybe past and present.
My favorite brand for storytelling of all time is Volkswagen in the
Okay,
si-
yeah.
in the 60s.
Yeah.
So Doyle Dane Bernbach, which I think was the greatest advertising agency of all time, led by Bill Bernbach, probably the greatest creative director of all time. What they did with that brand to me is amazing because if you put it in context, the early 60s, automobile advertising was all the same. It was, see the USA in your Chevrolet.
Yes.
And the VW brought humor to advertising for the first time. And then they brought incredible honesty. They would talk about how ugly the car was. And they talk about how underpowered the car was. And they would make all its faults strong points. And that even though it's underpowered, it doesn't take much gas. And just because it's ugly doesn't mean you can't love it. And it became the most beloved car
Yeah.
in North America, I think. And it was all due to the storytelling. One of the first ads, the headline was lemon. And I don't think I could sell that ad today. There's no way a car manufacturer is going to allow me to say lemon as a headline. But if you read the story underneath that headline, it was basically saying that the car you were looking at in that ad had a blemish on the chrome of the glove compartment, so it can't go out yet. So it really was a story about incredible quality
Right.
under a headline that is the most toxic word in automobile advertising.
Yeah.
So the storytelling made that car an icon. And I think they were the best storytellers in advertising for all time. A little
Mm.
more recently, I would say Nike is a great storyteller. Just do it. And every Nike ad you see is a story about a team or a person achieving something amazing. Um, Yet no Nike ad looks like the other Nike ad. Like they almost feel like they have nothing in common, but it's the storytelling that
Right.
makes it campaignable.
Right.
Apple's the same thing. I think Apple does incredible advertising. They harken back to Steve Jobs, which is so interesting to me. They've really been so consistent that virtually every Apple ad is about one person achieving something. It's not a business, it's not a company. It's always one person achieving something with the power of a computer, which was Steve Jobs' vision of taking the computing power out of IBM and giving it to the individual. So they've
Mm.
hewn to that strategy for all these years. And I love their storytelling.
Yeah.
You ask me who the best storyteller is today, right now at this moment, I would say Heinz.
Okay. Heinz.
Heinz is doing this ketchup is doing the best work I've seen in years. And most of it's done out of Canada. It's done out of Rethink in Vancouver.
Okay.
They are winning every award. They are being written up in Ad Age and Ad News every week. They are doing things like I wrote them things down. They did a big puzzle with 5,700 pieces or something. It's all red. One of those crazy puzzles.
Yeah.
They asked kids to draw just ketchup. They just said draw ketchup, and all the kids drew Heinz labels.
Wow.
They
That's
asked AI they asked AI draw a ketchup bottle, and AI drew Heinz. Like he had all
great.
these great ways. They did a tweet which was the slowest tweet in the world. 57 letters. The message was 57 letters, Andrew, but it took 57 hours to complete.
Oh,
So just sitting there watching this tweet slowly appear. All of that is storytelling, right? Because the richer a ketchup is, the slower it pours, which has always been Heinz raison d'etre, right? And all these fun ways of getting across how unique and how loved the brand is in that category is just incredible storytelling.
it's almost like they've gone meta. They're reinforcing their equity and creating new equity with it, right? Like, yeah,
Right.
wow. It's
In
mind
an
blowing.
in that old sleepy brand. Like
Right?
it's not a .com. Like it has been around forever.
So where are you seeing these ads? I mean, I know you're I shouldn't ask you personally, but where because
Where
I
can people see them?
yeah,
If
where can people see them? So we used to, tune in when we got home from work and we'd watch the evening news and everything. So and now the media landscape has become so fragmented and I see as many ads as the average person, but I have not seen that. So I'm wondering if they're on certain that maybe they are on television or streaming platforms that I'm not that
I
I'm
would say most of it's probably online
yeah,
in the form of videos, YouTube
yeah,
videos or whatever. Just they're great at creating press.
yeah,
All those Heinz ideas create press. And I always say the best advertising creates press because suddenly your budget feels like it's quadrupled if the
right.
press gets hold of it, right?
Yeah.
And Rethink are masters at that.
Yeah. So my next question I was going to ask you is related to the point that you just made there. So over time, other than becoming more fragmented and going into new media, obviously with the internet especially and video, what else has changed in terms of advertising and storytelling?
I think you sort of touched on it. I think storytelling is spilled out of traditional media for sure, but even online it's spilled out. So for example, sticking with Heinz, they put out at New York's Fashion Week, which just happened, they put out a line of clothes, Heinz, a ketchup, put out a line of clothes that had just a little ketchup drip. And it
Yeah,
became the talk of Fashion Week.
I did read about that.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
here's a ketchup finding a way to worm their way into New York's Fashion Week with
yeah.
with just the ongoingness of their strategy and their storytelling ability.
Yeah, you know what I would say there? The medium is the message, right? That's absolutely brilliant. I love
Yeah,
that.
and everything they do is tailored to that specific medium, which is so
Hmm.
great,
Hmm.
which I think is the sign of a great marketer. It's not the same thing in every medium. It's the same tone, it's the same overall strategy, but Instagram looks different than Facebook, and Facebook looks different than YouTube video. Like everything's tailored to that medium.
Right. Brilliant. So I'd love to switch over into personal branding. And you were talking about the Volkswagen Lemon ad and how they turned that into a pot. So it drew the reader in. What do you mean you're calling yourself a lemon? I better read what they're talking about here, right? And they basically turned, I've heard this term a lot recently. It's not a bug, it's a feature,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Um, and that also relates to humans. So when I'm coaching executives on their personal brand or their professional identity, they'll admit to me that there's some part of their identity that they try to hide, right? It could be, for example, their sense of humor. Like I don't want people to think I'm unprofessional, so I hide my sense of humor, or I hide my my upbringing, where I was brought up, or my accent, or they tried to somehow hide their identity. And then I talk to them about how we can create a narrative where what they're perceiving as a bug may actually be a feature.
Mhm.
Um, so that's my segue into asking you, Terry, whether you consciously and or strategically develop your personal brand.
I did an episode on personal branding a couple of years back,
Okay.
and it was the most popular episode of that season, which surprised me because I just never would have guessed that.
Yeah.
And that's why in the book that's sitting behind you there is a chapter on personal branding.
I read it.
That even though that book is for marketers, I really thought, there's everybody, even within marketing, has a brand. So I think like any great brand, a personal brand has to share so many things in common with, if you look to Nike or Apple or Heinz or whatever, is that first of all, they figure out what their uniqueness is in the category. And then everything they do kind of centers around that uniqueness. And there's a consistency then. There's a tone, there's a kind of language that a great brand uses. There are guardrails too, I think, but I don't think they can be super, super narrow. Because as you were saying, if someone's really funny or, if someone had a really tough upbringing but achieved a lot of success, that's a great story. Like that can really be, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Like it can be a really great part of your personal brand about how you overcame obstacles or overcame speed bumps to achieve success. So for me, a great brand is what makes you different? And then how can I express that in creative ways? And that means you have to look around the category, see what your competitors are doing, because you don't want to strike a similar tone to somebody else. You want to find your own piece of real estate that you can own. Even my radio show on CBC is different in one big way because I looked when I pitched the show to CBC, never thinking for a moment that they would ever buy it, Andrea. The advertising free CBC taking on a show about advertising.
Yeah, yeah.
Did, which shocked
Lovely
me.
irony. Love it.
I know it is, yeah. Um, I looked at all the shows on CBC and I thought, okay, I'm going to zig. Everybody's zigging, I'm going to zig. And what that was is I didn't do interviews. Like I may be the only narrative show on CBC. Maybe there's one more out there, but I chose to go narrative storytelling instead of interviewing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's the only thing that distinguishes. I mean, it is
No, it's
that's
one
a
of them. Yeah.
dominant. So you also have a beautiful voice. You also have incredible knowledge. You're also
Yeah.
a beautiful storyteller, right? I could go on. So
But that was the
these
starting
are
point, though, Andrea, was that beyond all of that lovely stuff, the starting point was how can I stand out on the air just sonically?
right,
So
right.
I thought, okay, I'm not going to do interviews. That was a big decision because there's a lot of great advertising people I could interview.
I'm sure, and it's fun.
And it's
It's a lot
fun,
of
right?
fun.
Yeah, it's fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was maybe you've answered this next question with what you just said, but so what's your product category or your cat or personal category, I guess? I mean, you're saying other radio shows.
Well, you know, the first chapter of that book is what business are you really in?
Yeah,
And that you think that's so easy to answer, and
right.
and
It's
I
not.
give some examples in there that Molson's not in the beer business, they're in the party business, and Michelin's not in the tire business, they're in the safety business. I mean, you really have to know what people are buying from you in order to be relevant. Yeah.
You see, I'm opening the book to show you as I was reading that chapter in particular, I took my marker out. I started writing like talk about talk is in the business of, right? Like, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. But that, I mean, that gets to the heart of your question. You have to know what it is people want from you.
Mhm.
Because as I say in the book, if someone's shopping for tires because they want to make sure their family's safe, if you're selling speed as a tire feature and the place across the street selling safety, they're going to cross the street, even though you're
Yeah.
both selling tires, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think you have to really, and it's so hard to, peel the onion to figure out what it is that you offer. Even my show, it it started out as a show about creativity. And then it very quickly morphed into a show about strategy. And that
Mhm.
has been my ongoingness. And I'm a creative guy. I was really always dealt with strategy, but I wasn't a strategic account director. I was a writer.
Right.
But here I am evolving into strategy.
Yes.
So my show is really a look. I take people on a look behind the closed doors of advertising. Like everybody's got should have an elevator pitch. That's how you get to the nub of who you are and what you offer is try coming up with a one sentence elevator pitch
Of what you do,
of
whether
what
you're a
you do
brand or a person. Yeah. Yeah.
and what you do and what makes you unusual.
Yeah.
I have a chapter in that book, which I find such a great exercise. It's really hard to do well, that exercise. But, I always say, Dirty Harry, that great Clint Eastwood film,
Yeah.
series of films that made him famous, really. What was it about Dirty Harry that made him so compelling? And it wasn't that he was a rogue cop. It wasn't that he was tough. It wasn't that he broke the rules, which is what everybody answers. The true answer to that is he was more violent than the criminals he chased.
That's right. I just read that. I just read that.
Like when it's articulated, you go, yes, that's exactly why he was so mesmerizing and why he created so much, that character created so much controversy
Yeah.
and and ticket buying was because you've never really seen it before.
Yeah.
And even I think Wired magazine, which is my favorite elevator pitch of all time, it's about entertainment technology trends. And their elevator pitch when they were looking for funding from investors was, we want to feel like we've been mailed back from the future.
Yeah. I love that too.
Maybe the best elevator pitch of all time.
My favorite elevator pitch of all time is, the Sigourney Weaver Aliens movie?
Yeah.
Do you know what the elevator pitch was for it?
Jaws in space.
Yes.
Yeah.
I probably learned that from you,
May
Terry.
have. You may have. Yeah. Once you can articulate a really great elevator pitch, and that means, I mean, look at the language in the three we've talked about there. It isn't like I am a marketing communications expert. Like that's not an elevator pitch. That's just a statement. That's not an
Yeah.
elevator pitch.
Yeah.
An elevator pitch should make people lean right in. So
Mhm.
when Wired magazine said to their investors, we want our magazine to feel like it's been mailed back from the future, all the investors around the table instantly were interested in that magazine.
Mhm.
You
And
know, I
it
remember,
has That unexpected element that you said always
Yeah.
is so important. And even
There's
if a story is one sentence, right? If it has something unexpected in it, then
Yeah, a little surprise or an incredibly interesting collection of words that sums up what is the essence of you that makes you so different.
mhm. Okay, so I want to have time for the rapid fire questions at the end, but I before we do that, I want to shift to your most recent book, My Best Mistake.
Yeah.
Can you share with the listeners what the basic premise of the book is, and then also share with us maybe one or two of your best mistakes?
The premise of that book was people who more that I have a couple of other of additional little stories in there, but the overall arc of that book is people who made catastrophic career decisions where they lost their jobs, their credibility, their livelihood. They lost everything. And it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to them.
Yeah.
So I thought that as an exploration was interesting because when that happens to most people, they usually disappear. They disappear into the ether, or they just completely change careers or vocations and just like wipe the slate clean.
Yeah.
But I
Start from
thought it
scratch.
did, yeah. And I thought people who actually muscle through that are more interesting. So the first chapter of that book is about Jaws, Steven Spielberg. It's such a well-told story, except for one detail, right? So everybody knows he was out on location in Martha's Vineyard. He's got three mechanical sharks that he's had built to scale, which ate up most of his budget, by the way. He's a first-time film director, really done some television. This is his first time at the big leagues. I think he's only 28 or something.
Oh,
He gets out to Martha's Vineyard. They put the sharks in the water. He's got his cast, his crew, everything out there, and the sharks immediately malfunction. And he's paralyzed because the main beast of this film doesn't work. And he goes into his hotel room one night thinking he's going to lose it all. He's going to lose his chances being a director. He's going to be pulled back to Hollywood. He's going to be fired. He's sitting in the dark, panicking. And then he asks himself the most interesting question. He says, what would Hitchcock do?
ooh, wow.
And in that moment, he knew the answer. And the answer was what you can't see is the most terrifying thing of all. So then he figures out a way to imply the shark, the fin through the water, or the pulling the big yellow what it barrels through the water to show its, or the music, the great score, right?
Beautiful.
Dun.
Yeah.
But the mistake he made, which is really why I decided to retell that well-told story, because everybody knows those details, is when he tried the sharks out in Hollywood, he tried them in freshwater tanks.
Uh,
His mistake was he didn't try them in salt water. The salt water corroded all the mechanics. I thought I never knew that detail. And that's why I loved the story. And that's why I loved how I mean, that huge mistake he made in the filmmaking led to the best part of that film and
right.
launched him on his career. Like, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to him.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting that that story is your lead in this book, Terry, because as an audio storyteller, you're leaving just in the same way that he left the moviegoers image of the shark up to the moviegoers, right? When you're telling your stories on your podcast and your radio show, you're leaving it up to us to kind of fill in the blanks in our minds about what everything looked like,
That's the
right?
joy of audio.
That is
You
the
know,
joy of,
your listener becomes your art director. And
yeah.
I always thought that was so incredibly powerful. I mean, a lot of writers in advertising don't like audio, don't like radio, let's call it radio, don't like radio. They're afraid of it. They much rather do television or print or film because at first glance, it looks like audio doesn't have all the same toolbox. You don't have casts, like you don't have faces, you don't have wardrobe, you don't have locations.
Yeah.
I always thought that was way more freeing because I
Yeah.
could be on the moon in a
Yeah.
radio commercial. If I've done it correctly, you're with me as a listener. I could be at the bottom of the ocean. And all of that I couldn't do on television because it was too expensive.
Yeah. That's really interesting, right? And this, yeah, it's the power of audio. I wonder if these art directors or creatives are also thinking that it's just less tangible. right? Like it's an audio file. I can't actually open something or
That's why it's also the hardest to present, Andrea, because you can show a print layout, you can show a TV storyboard, but with radio, you have to actually get up in a boardroom and perform it for your client, which gets to your great question, are you an introvert or an extrovert? I am. I love this question. I was so glad that it's on your list.
Okay, let's do it. Are you an introvert or an extrovert, Terry?
Complete introvert.
Really?
Oh, complete introvert. So they say the definition of a introvert versus an extrovert is, do you get recharged by being alone or recharged by being around a lot of people? So I recharge not by being alone. I'm not a hermit. I mean, but away from the crowd is where
Yep.
I recharge, right?
Yep.
So that was a big hindrance to me when I started my career because I learned quite quickly that you had to learn how to present in a boardroom. You had to
Hmm.
get up, you had to be able to perform, you had to be able to field questions, you had to be able to really own the room. And there's a lot of money riding on those meetings, right? You could spend, $1 million on it. You're trying to convince someone to spend $1 million on your idea. There's a lot of pressure going on. And I hated it. It was my white knuckle fear. I would beg people to present my work for me because it was just the thing I feared most. And then I realized that by letting other people present my work, most of it wasn't getting sold.
Uh,
So I thought, okay, I have to learn how to do this. So I was very fortunate because I had a great mentor. A creative director I had early in my career was a magnificent presenter. He was just, oh my goodness, he could just thrill you with the work. It was something about him. And I just watched him constantly at work. And I slowly, by osmosis, learned how to do it. And then I actually got over the hump of fearing it. I would volunteer a lot. So, creative director would say, okay, who's going to present the work tomorrow? And I go put up my hand and go, okay, O'Reilly's going to present the work. Who's going to present the strategy? Jill's going to, and I would go home and just rock in the dark, because I've now put myself in a situation where I have to do it. But I did it so many times that I actually got over the hump of fearing it to actually looking forward to it. For an
Amazing.
introvert like me, that is a big journey.
Yeah.
So I can
So,
be situationally specific extrovert.
oh wow. Wow, you just came in with the zinger. So, the most common answer that I get is like I'm a recovered introvert. That's some version of that, right? Like I was an introvert, but I overcame it. And I'm like, introverts are the best listeners, right?
Yes. World needs
The
introverts.
world needs, yes. But your story, I'm sure, will inspire a lot of people, whether they're an introvert or an extrovert or not. Okay, so that wasn't so rapid fire, but it was a very valuable story for everyone to hear. The second rapid fire question is, what are your communication pet peeves?
First of all, I think you touched on it too. I think people don't listen.
Mm.
I think listening is a big part of communicating. Like two monologues don't make a dialogue, right?
Yeah, very well put. You are going to be quoted on that, Terry.
Yeah, I've seen, I've been in so many meetings where somebody will ask a client a question and then answer it before
Ooh,
the client's had a chance to answer. Like again, it's just a monologue then.
ooh,
So I think listening is a very underrated, huge part of a great communicator is listening and know thy audience.
yeah.
The golden rule, putting yourself in the shoes of who you're talking to or imagining. It's a funny thing, if I'll write an episode of our show and I'll send, I'll record my part and the engineer puts it together and we'll talk about it and I'll make a list of revisions, sometimes 20 or 30 revisions long because I'm in the weeds on it. And then I'll listen to it, over the course of that process, like 6 times. And then it'll air on CBC and it feels completely different to me
Mhm,
because I know a million people are listening to it.
mhm.
Like I'll pick out little mistakes in it where I thought, how could I have missed that when I listened to it 6 times in a row?
So I just wanted to share with you that over the past several years, people ask me all the time, what do you think communication superpowers are? What are the things we need to work on? And I would come up with a list of three, depending on the person. The three most important things probably are confidence, listening, and storytelling,
Yeah.
right? If you don't have confidence, actually you have nothing because you're paralyzed, to your point. And then being a good listener is a great next step. And then kind of the icing on the cake is becoming an eloquent or effective storytelling.
Theodore Levitt has that great line that I've stolen for decades, which is people don't buy 3/4 inch drill bits, they buy 3/4 inch holes.
Yes.
And you have to understand, even not just brand advertising, but as a personal brand or in a meeting or an exchange, you have to understand what it is people are buying, right? You have to listen to them and know what they want
Yeah.
and not just make it myopic in one way.
Yeah. So this is what I hand wrote in the front of the book when you did that. You shared what the story in the first chapter that you just shared here, and I put the book down and I thought, what is talk about talk selling? Is it communication skills coaching? No, it's actually selling confidence.
That's what it is. Exactly right.
Thank
Takes a
thank
long time to get to that though, doesn't it?
yeah.
To peel that onion to get to that
I
word.
love the metaphor, peeling the onion. I've been dancing around that idea of confidence for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, the final rapid fire question. Is there a podcast or a book that you've been recommending lately? Not your books, not your podcast, not my podcast, something else out there.
Um, I read so much. Oh my goodness.
Do you? Oh yeah, you have a book club. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can see, I don't know if you can see behind me. I can't see myself on the thing, but I mean, that's just marketing books back there,
That's
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Ugh.
Let me think about that for 1 second. One podcast, it's got nothing to do with marketing per se, that I love is The Plot Thickens from
Oh,
Turner Classic Movies. So Ben Mankiewicz, who I love, I just love his intro. If you ever watch that channel, he always does these really wonderful interviews or he'll do great introductions to movies, old movies, telling you what happened, what happened behind the scenes, et cetera, et cetera. He has this great podcast called The Plot Thickens, where every season is about a different filmmaker or actor or actress. And it is absolutely rivetingly fascinating.
oh, excellent. I will check it out and I'll put a link to it
Yeah,
in the show notes.
it's really good. There's one more I'll talk to you about just very quickly. There's a podcast series called, I think it's called The Bank Robber Diaries. I may have that name wrong, but this whole series, they interview a real life modern day bank robber
Oh,
who robbed, I want to say, I may have my numbers wrong because I listened to the series a year or two ago. He may have robbed like 20 banks in California. Now, not some like now. And he talks about how he does it, about it was just a fascinating look into a criminal mind that you would never normally get. Like, here's how I case a bank. Here's how I make my getaway. Here's where I parked my car because I had to run out with all the money and I had to it was like just mind blowing to get inside
wow.
the mind of someone like that. And then he's now, you know, beyond that, he eventually an FBI guy caught him. He went to jail. Now he's on the other side of that, and it's a fascinating story.
I was curious whether they were interviewing him in jail.
No, he'd already done his time.
He'd done his time. So, is there anything else you want to leave with me and the Talk About Talk listeners in terms of storytelling or personal branding or advertising?
To be a wonderful storyteller, in my humble opinion, I think you have to have an enormous sense of curiosity.
Mm,
I think you have to be curious about people and things and why people do the things they do and influences in the culture and again that's about listening or asking the right questions. And I think really wonderful writers have this ability, Andrea, to be in a situation then hover above it at the same time. So you're having an exchange with your car mechanic, but you're also watching it from above in the ceiling because you're watching the dynamics
yeah.
that I remember I was getting my car fixed and I looked at the bill and I had a heart attack. And my mechanic said to me, you know what? It was really difficult, but I didn't even bill you for all our hours. It's you lose, I lose. And I thought, what a great way to sell a high bill was to use
Yeah,
the term "you lose, I lose." And then as a writer, I hovered above that moment, and I grabbed that moment to use elsewhere. And and
beautiful.
and I'm always making notes, by the way, of things people tell me, or I make copious notes on every book I read. And and I collect them all. And the great thing about being digitized is you can search anything. But I may find a wonderful story that someone's told me, Andrea, and I may not use that story for 5 years. But when I use that story, it is the perfect story for that moment.
Oh, gosh.
As a
Where
writer,
do
I
you
collect stories.
so where do you put them?
It's
Do
on
you
my
put
computer, it's on a hard drive in case my computer dies. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've got even just book notes. I have probably 1,600 pages of book notes so far.
Wow. Incredible.
Just pulling out
Incredible.
little moments, little stories, little turns of phrase that I can
Yeah.
attribute back to somebody. But like, you don't buy 3/4 inch drill bits, you buy 3/4 inch holes, like all those little nuggets that just
Yeah.
clarify.
Okay, I'm going to sneak one last question in because like you're basically serving this one to me. Have you created a language model for AI based on all of your books and all of your podcast episodes? Because I feel like people would pay money to ask Terry.
I haven't done anything like that.
Well, there's an opportunity for you.
AI is kind of I've been stepping back from that just to see it unfold because it's so new to all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, who knows?
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much, Terry, for sharing your stories and your advice very much. I learned a lot and I have learned so much over the years. And now I'm thrilled to share that with the Talk About Talk listeners. So thank you.
Well, this has been a terrific conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Isn't Terry great? If you want to hear more of his fantastic voice, check out his Under the Influence podcast. And I want to say thank you, Terry, for so graciously sharing your insights with us. As you could probably tell, I had a lot of fun in that interview. Did you catch where I realized I was telling Terry a story that I actually learned from him? My favorite elevator pitch of all time is, the Sigourney Weaver Aliens movie?
Yeah.
Do you know what the elevator pitch was for it?
Jaws in space.
Yes.
Yeah.
I probably learned that from you,
May
Terry.
have. You may have. Yeah.
Pretty funny, but probably the best implicit compliment ever, right? Repeating a story back to someone that first shared it with you. Anyway, now, as promised, I'd like to summarize 3 main points from our conversation. 1, the necessary ingredients for a great story. 2, the power of overcoming obstacles or speed bumps to achieve success. And 3, this idea of peeling back the onion. Okay, so first, storytelling. Terry says that there are 2 great things that make for a great story. First, it's structure. You have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And he says a teasing opening, a sumptuous middle, and an inevitable end. It's just so satisfying. And second, he says we need the element of surprise. As Terry says, unexpected moments add impact. And to be a wonderful storyteller, Terry also says you have to have an enormous sense of curiosity. Curiosity about people and about things. It's about listening and asking questions. The second point I want to reinforce here is the power of overcoming obstacles. This is the point of Terry's latest book, My Best Mistake. Terry talked about the example of how Steven Spielberg's Jaws mishap, i.e., the mechanical shark rusting in the salt water, turned that movie into a long-lasting cultural icon. He also specifically mentioned how weaknesses or obstacles or bugs of ours can become an integral and compelling part of our own personal brand. It really is about what makes us unique. The third thing I want to reinforce is this idea of peeling back the onion. It could be for your product brand or for your personal brand, but thinking deeply, peeling back the onion regarding what business you're in. So for example, Molson is not in the beer business, rather it's in the party business. And Michelin is not in the tire business, rather they're in the safety business. And Talk About Talk is not in the business of communication coaching, rather it's in the business of elevating your confidence. Now, Ask yourself, what business are you really in? Okay, there are so many more rich points, but if I have to limit myself to 3 from this conversation, it's the ingredients for a great story, the power of overcoming obstacles, and this idea of peeling back the onion to determine what business you're really in. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I put links to Terry's podcast and his books in the show notes, so please check them out. And I want to say thank you again, Terry. It was wonderful to meet you, and I loved our conversation. Thank you so much for listening. Please let me know what you thought of this episode. Connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a DM. Talk soon.